Well, hello, this is Dr. Chris Lemmon, and this is September chat, and probably the last one in this theme that I've been talking about. And so, just as a quick kind of precursor, um, I had a center for a while, and I was using some tools and techniques that I learned from my education and from business and sales, marketing, training people. I did a lot of training. So I utilized some of those to bring people in and help them trying to change their relationship to life. They had some frustrations, they had some ups and downs, they had some experiences with phenomena they were trying to integrate into the real world and find the truth in. And of course, those are two different focuses, totally don't blend very well. Um, and and so that was very, very frustrating. And so anyway, I would teach them tools, techniques, things I'd picked up. I used to always get the question, where'd you learn that? It's kind of like I read a book or I took a class, is what they're asking me, right? I realized from my experience, I've worked with lots of people that utilize the same concepts, but the experience of them learning it was totally different. So if I told them how I learned it, it would actually inhibit them because they'd have to have the same life experience, which is not going to happen. So, so I didn't have an answer for them. So I just would blow it off and be able to say, "You're learning it now." That was my answer. You're learning it now. Like, here you are. You're at the process right now. You're learning it. Get your head around it. Um, so now at 82, I just decided that maybe I should answer all those questions and record them for prosperity, just in case some fool out there didn't get it yet and thinks, well, he never told me, where he learned this stuff from. It's like, I'm not sure I would have helped you, but there it is. So my whole story, my condition, which is where it is, where you're sitting at the time, is where the variation, where the lessons come to you, right? Um, if you want to call it an inspiration, a guide, I don't care what you call it. You could call it a phenomena. I just call it the condition, right? It's just the variations. And so here I am in a basement being protected because I was a sickly kid. I got sick. I couldn't go out in the rain. I couldn't go out too much sun. I couldn't go out in the cold. I was a mess. And I didn't know that. I had no idea what was wrong or going on with me. So here I was playing in the basement. I could hear people outside, but I wasn't part of that whole program. So at age 4, my mother decided that she was going to dress me all up. I mean, I was in bundled outfit that was like a sock outfit. I mean, I was all just covered up. My face was covered. You could just see my eyes and a little bit of my face, and I was all bundled. I couldn't even get my arms straight. I mean, I walked around. That was really bizarre. She took me to the mall in this outfit so I could get a picture on Santa Claus. Nice. I'm 4 years old. Uh, I don't know. I was like, not something I particularly cherish, but I thought really all this uncomfort and all this for a picture I'm taking in front of this guy with a beard. It's like, really? Um, and then she said, what's really going to be fun now that I bought you this outfit, on Christmas Eve, we're going to go to the Christmas parade. It wasn't at Eve, it was just at dusk, right? But we're going to go to the Christmas parade and you get to see Santa Claus again. Of course, a different version of Santa Claus, but nonetheless, Santa Claus. So I'm once again bundled up in this outfit, just unbelievable. And we're out there at my mother and what was to become eventually my stepfather, somebody she was dating at the time. And we went out there and he sat me up on his shoulder so I could see the whole parade, and I got to see it. I was so cold. I mean, it's like I was not used to being outside. So it's like I was so cold, it was unbelievable. I got home and I was just trembling. My grandmother put hot water in a pan, hot chocolate for me. My teeth were chattering. I just couldn't stop it. My my fingers were numb. It was an experience that a lot of other kids they would have got over quick because it was like they were used to it. They grew up in that environment, Pennsylvania. But I wasn't used to it. So I was sitting there thinking, this is not acceptable. I I got to do something about this. I'm thinking that I'm gonna eventually they're telling me I'm gonna get big enough where I can go out in the world and play with the other kids. But right now I was too little, whatever that meant. But basically I was too ill. Um, and I was waiting to get big enough to go play with the other kids, and now it's all of a sudden I'm not sure I want to be out in that world. So for that next year, I sat there in my basement thinking, my grandmother makes rules. She has a rule, no smoking in the house because I think more than anything, it's messy, right? Ashes. Everybody smokes. In those days, you went to a restaurant, you went anywhere, there was always smoking. That was like you you sat down at the table in the center of the table of the restaurant, there was an ashtray, and everybody had a coffee cup. And the first thing that would happen was I would sit at a table and they would take my coffee cup away because I'm a kid, and then they would take the ashtray, I would push it a little bit away from me, but my mother still would light a cigarette no matter what. And and she would smoke a cigarette while she's looking at the menu and order a cup of coffee. And and even though a waiter would say to me, "What would you like to drink?" And I would tell him water or lemonade or iced tea or whatever, I'd always get a glass of milk. And of course, I didn't drink milk, so it just sat there and went to waste, really. Um, so it's always I looked at all these things that are going on. I think, how do I create a boundary? How do you make a rule? How do you do that? Right. So I started realizing somewhere in my thinking that to make a rule means there has to be an authority. So if I'm going to build a rule for me, then I have to be the authority. Oh, wow. So I have to change my relationship to who I am to be able to do that. Wow. It has to come from here, not from out there somewhere. It can't be a sign on the wall, right? It's just like, wow, okay. So this is intriguing. So the next year, now I'm age 5 at Christmas time, we go to the Christmas parade again. Same boyfriend. She's stayed with him for a long, long time. But same boyfriend until she passed, and then he died a few years later. They made it together for I don't know, a long time. But here we were going to Christmas again, and it was so cold and a storm at my age 5 that my mother said, "No way am I going out in it." But her soon-to-be husband said, "Well, I promised the boy, like I'd take him to the parade, so I'll take him. He's all bundled up." And I said, "Oh, I'm not getting in that crazy outfit that I wore last time." So I had a jacket on. I had a shirt underneath it. I had slacks on. I actually tucked my pants cuffs at the bottom end of my socks to keep air from coming up to the bottom. But other than that, I was fine. I had gloves on. I wasn't all bundled up. This time at age 5, I didn't need to be on the shoulder. I just moved people away and got to the front of the line. I could see the parade. Everything was fine. When I got back, my grandmother was all set up with hot water and everything, but my teeth weren't chattering. I was not cold. I took those cloth off and I just sat there and I go, wow, this is so different. Like, wow. Even now to this day, 80 years later, why almost 80 years later, I still I live in the Northwest and I don't wear a jacket. It's like I run around all winter in a t-shirt. I I adapted to weather conditions. I prefer the cold to the warm, but I've been all over the world and been in the Sahara Desert, been all over the place. I can manage all that heat too. It's just preference for something a little colder than warmer, but nonetheless, I don't have a problem. I don't have to dress up or dress down. I don't have to do any of those things. So that's the nature of setting a boundary of some sort. It's like, wow, that's kind of interesting. I had then had to start to package things and frame things. This is not unusual. You see people they're driving, say they're going to go to the store or something, and they start driving and they get to the store and it starts raining. So they sit in the car for a little bit. They kind of get their head around like, oh, it's raining. I'm going to get wet. So I want to park close to the front door. I want to be able to look out and make sure that I don't have to stand there and wait for a car to go by and get drenched. Um, we we change the parameters by condition that we put ourselves into. I'm the person that's going to leave the car and go over there. So I have to make the rules, the boundaries for what I will tolerate, what I will agree with, what I will do to be able to get in that front door of that store. And what is that going to take, right? So those are how you set boundaries. You have to reference yourself as not the victim to that scenario, but you're empowered to be that person in that scenario. It's so easy to say, but gosh, so hard to do. It's very, very challenging. It took me that whole year of being able to play with those ideas. By the time I got down, I was most certainly, um, at first, I would say things and I would think, oh my goodness, they're going to think I'm defiant. When I told my grandmother I wasn't going to eat her food anymore. It's like I'm 5 years old. And it's like a huge step in defiance. But she didn't see it as defiance because by then I had established that this is my boundaries. I didn't say she was wrong. I didn't say she was bad. I didn't say the food was horrible. I just said, I'm not eating that food anymore. So it's like, wow, that's a shock. She could feel that all of a sudden, this is my boundaries. And she recognized that I had reaction to things. I was sick. I had been sick. So she called the doctor, who in those days came to the house. They didn't have a doctor's office. And so he came and he talked to me and he said, boy, call me boy. He said, boy, why don't you eat that food? And I said, she put some food on that. I take a deep sniff and I just get sick and I throw up all over it. And he goes, oh. So he looks at my grandmother and says, well, don't feed him that anymore. Feed him whatever he wants. I love it, you know. So all of a sudden I start to realize, wow, I set a boundary and someone recognized that I'd set a boundary and they supported me. It's like, wow, that's interesting. And of course, he went down and they had to drive to another city because we didn't have facilities in our little hole in the wall town where I had to get all this testing done. In those days to see if you're allergic to things, they would dip it in a solution and it scratch your back. And then they would see which ones of the scratches got infected. So they'd know what, there's more civilized ways of doing it today. But that was the way that they did it at the time. And so all those things that I had reactions to when we started realizing that and we started eliminating them from my environment, the adults then started participating because now they had someone else's rule, not my just boundaries. But then I started getting better. I started getting healthier. I quit being sick. Like it's all over. Oh, I just all we really needed to do is more information. But the assumption was that everyone else had their idea that this is the way it is, so it's that way for everybody. It's not that way for everybody. What makes us really unique as a human race is the fact that we're different. My gosh, do you recognize how boring it was if we all thought the same and all looked the same? And it's like, ah, it's it would be it would not be very interesting. So we need to be able to have boundaries, be able to establish those boundaries. So when people would come in and they'd have all kinds of conditions going on in their life, they would have frustrations, they would have rules, right? Oh, someone said I shouldn't do this, or someone said blah 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 blah. It's like, okay, so you can't do that right now. Can you change that in your world? Can you set up a boundary where that won't come to you anymore? Uh, I have all kinds of foods that I learned back when I was 5 that I should not eat because I have a reaction to them, right? I don't process sulfur very well in my body for whatever reason. Although our liver processes a ton of sulfur, but obviously I have some type of a threshold, so I have to be careful. So onions are a real high sulfur food. I eat onions and I would have a reaction to it. It's like an allergic reaction. When I was a little bit older, the kids in the neighborhood would come on over. We'd go to the garden. They'd pick up a red onion. They'd peel it, wipe it off, and they'd eat it like an apple. I took a couple bites of that, and I'm off to the hospital. Like that's it. So I had most certainly a reaction to it. At the time when I was a kid, I went along with them eating that onion. I knew I wasn't supposed to eat onions, but I didn't think of that red thing as an onion. Uh, I just thought of the onions as yellow, white, right? Like, eh, you just don't know what you don't know. And so I took a bite out of that thinking, oh, it's like an apple. And I'm taking a bite out of it. And then all of a sudden I can't breathe and I'm kind of shaking. And so fortunately, my uncle had a car and he was there. He rushed me down to this little medical center and they revived me. And so, and then I told my uncle I was eating one of those red things like an apple. And he said, "You mean a red onion?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "It's not supposed to have onions." You start to see we need information, we need boundaries, we need to take a look where we're at, and then we need to expand the range, which we can do. I got well. We could expand the range out if we could get those obstacles out of the way. And then when the range gets bigger, you can change your relationship with them. Um, I, I got to the place of not eating onions. I have traveled all over the world, and people come back and they say, "Well, what do you do when you get to Mexico or get to India or get to?" I just tell them no onions, and they make it with no onions. Every now and then there'll be a dish that'll come up that they'll say, "Well, no, the first ingredient is onions in it, so you shouldn't eat that." And then that's problem solved. I have never had, I've only had one incident all these years where I accidentally got some onions, which I had a really big reaction to. I was actually exhausted the next day from it. And that was, I was in Norway and I ordered a salad in a restaurant. And I told them no onions. They didn't put any onions in the salad. It was great. But the salad dressing had onions in it. And they didn't think of that in terms. I told her I'd prefer just a little olive oil on the salad, but she just put dressing on it. It's just like whatever. It's a restaurant. They just do everything habitual. And I sat there and ate that. And by the time we left there, I was having a hard time walking and breathing. And the next day, I wound up staying in a house all day, recuperating from that reaction. So I got through it in 24 hours, but it was like, but that's never happened anywhere else. It's like, wow. So in all these years traveling, Morocco, Turkey, everywhere, right? South America, everywhere. Um, and it was just very, very simple to, because when they didn't even question me, it's just established as a boundary. But when you establish something as a boundary, then it's just like, oh, this is this is the way I operate. And people accept it. Just like my grandmother, who didn't allow smoking in her house. People come to the front door with a cigarette in her hand, which was typical in those days. And she'd step back and say, "I don't allow smoking in my house. I need to close the door." It's like, wow. Uh, there was a guy that was actually there on official business. And so he was repairing a heater or something, and he put his cigarette out on the ground out front on her front porch. And she just kind of shook her head. I can remember seeing that. She's thinking, "Oh, how what a rude person." But she did after that leave him in, and he went down to do whatever repair he was doing. And I can remember that when he left, the whole house smelled of smoke. I thought my grandmother, when I came up from the basement, I thought my grandmother was cooking something. I go, what are you cooking? It didn't smell particularly good. And she said, "No, that was the person that smoked the cigarette." I'm thinking, wow. Uh, I mean, my mother smoked cigarettes. Everybody in the family smoked cigarettes. They just couldn't smoke them at grandma's house. But I think that they avoided smoking a cigarette just before they came home. My mother might leave a restaurant, smoke a cigarette, and then she's headed home, and it might be 15 minutes. And so that time it starts to clear a little bit. But I can remember my mother's clothes always smelled of smoke, and none of my grandmother's stuff did. So it's intriguing. We need to learn in life to build up boundaries so we can embrace new things and and be able to step out, have new adventures, be able to define ourselves in a bigger way. If if you don't have those sense of boundaries, then you're always a victim to it. Then you're stuck being sick kid in a basement somewhere. Um, I think it was a wonderful experience from my perspective because it gave me a lot of autonomy and a lot of freedom, and it gave me a chance to play with ideas. And when I did finally get into during the summer, my grandmother was at a church camp. So we'd spend the summer at a church camp. It was a little bungalow that we stayed in with. The church camp had no electricity, no running water. And we were there for the whole summer. So we had to bring water by the buckets. I had a little bucket because it's all I could carry, but my grandmother actually would have to bring buckets of water, would bring coal down. We'd have to get ice from the ice guy to put in a little ice box. It was pretty primitive. No lights in there. We had to have kerosene lights at nighttime. Um, and but it was an interesting world because there were a lot of kids there, especially on the weekends, and they were all strange kids. They weren't my neighborhood kids. So my neighborhood kids were used to me not playing. I was sick all the time. But these kids didn't know me. So I got to interact with kids that I didn't have a history with. And I could show up as a total different person. And I could then play with boundaries. I could play then with phenomena. I could see things. I talked to trees. I talked to flowers. I could see the energy in things. I could see the energy in people. I could see all this moving around. Uh, I I didn't have to talk to anybody about it because by this time I recognized that the other people don't see this. So we're not going to have a conversation because it's not their truth. It's not necessarily a truth at all, but it's a phenomena that I can experience. Uh, the truth of life, the logical structure of life, is limited to just this. You're born and you die. In that span in between, you better have inspiration. You better find something you're good at. You better step out and learn some things. You better have some interactions with life. Otherwise, you're just simply spending a lifetime waiting to die. And so many people that would come to my center were somebody who has spent a lifetime waiting to die. Like, wow, so interesting. They'd have no adventure. They would not do anything. They would not step outside, and everything was really buffered. And and they eventually became sick. You know, this really needs to get a change. This really needs to get updated. So in a space-time continuum, we start to recognize that whatever I was when I started this talk, I'm no longer that. It's changed. I can't go back to that. This the interesting thing about this universe that we live in and this whole place that we're playing this game of life is like, wow, it's interesting. It has most certainly it has rules, right? So we can look at those rules, and that's what the world likes to call the truth. The truth is their set of rules. You want your own personal set of rules, you develop boundaries. What are you going to go do? What do you, and so you have an opportunity to buffer and hide, which we know people that do. I have had clients already call me and say, um, send me a letter and say, I need help. I'm in my house and I can't go outside. I'm afraid of everything. Um, and I cannot answer a telephone if somebody calls me with a cell phone. So if you call me on a landline, then I can talk to you on the phone. I need help. So I would talk to that person on the phone. They wanted me to come help them. I went all the way out to their house. I got to their house. I went in there and they had a screen in the room. And they sat on one side of the screen and I sat on the other side to buffer me. And they had a screen that was made of a wire mesh and they had a grounding cord on it to the electrical outlet of the screw. It's like because they couldn't stand the energy from another person. So it's like, wow. I went to see them a couple times and then I wrote it off. But I can remember sitting across that screen and I said, you're trying to ground the energy from me. I said, now I want you to sit there, take a deep breath, and I'm going to flood you with energy. And so I just took a whole concept or an idea, energized it, right? Just a thought and energized it. It's like you get an idea. Well, let's play cards. Well, then to do that, you get deck of cards, you do protocols, blah, 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 to implement that idea, right? So that implementing that is a flow of energy. Now, this is what's fun. You can have the idea, not do it, but sit there and flow the energy. Wow. So then when you sit there and entertain an idea and flow the energy, you're now creating. That's the difference of just doing and creating. So I took an idea. We can get rid of this screen, her boundaries. We could get rid of this screen and we can then have a relationship. The boundary means that she's protecting herself from me. How can I help her? So I just took that energy and sent it right over top of that screen. And she just sat there and started shaking a little bit. And I just saw her relax. And then she nodded out and went to sleep. So I moved the screen out of the way while she's sitting there, nodded out, moved the screen out of the way, left it wired, but I've just moved it out of the way. And I just waited for a little bit. And finally she came to again. I said, okay, now we took care of that problem. And she looked at me, she says, oh, I feel better already. Thank you for being here. I'm like, wow. She says, I'm not sure I can take very much of this. I said, well, can you imagine 30 seconds and a half hour? Well, 30 seconds is a lot less than a half hour. Yeah. Can you imagine? If you can imagine a half hour of your life, you could imagine that in less than 30 seconds. And she goes, huh? And now she's in a trance. That's a trance state. So I got her into a trance state. Right? You can't do two things at once. So it puts you in a trance state. So now she's in a trance state, trying to figure out whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes or whatever. And I sat there and talked to her for half an hour. And when I left, she hugged me. Can you imagine? Right? But the next time I went, the screen was up again, and I had to go through the whole routine again. It's like, wow. Uh, there was, she was so terrified that she wouldn't expand that perimeter. So I might have had to go see her 50, 60 times. I don't know, every day for a year. Uh, but I made a decision saying, no cost payoff for this. It's too long a process. She needs to find someone else to fix her. And it's like, she just would recalibrate back to minimal. It's like, here I'm past 80 years old. If I was still living in a basement, afraid to go outside because I'm sickly. I have met people like that, and she's a person like that. Do you get what my story is about? It's like, wow, that's interesting. All right. We need to step out in the world. We need to learn. We're enthused and excited about that. Look at any kid. We're enthused and excited. We want to learn something. We see things that terrify us a little bit, and we have to then change the relationship, right? And we play with it a little bit. We just touch this and do that. Some little kids pick up spiders. Some of them are afraid of spiders. We have natural fears, snakes and spiders, but I know other kids that just pick up a snake. I had a pet snake for a while. I had kids come over and they go, ooh, and they were afraid of it. They didn't want to sit next to the cage, but I had other kids that says, oh, can I hold it? And I said, sure, just reach in and pick it up. They reached in, pick it up. Said, it's not going to bite you. And, so it's like, so that's what it did. Now, that's not a general rule with all snakes because snakes are pretty aggressive, but most certainly the one I had was what they called a milk snake. And not that it drank milk, but anyway, it ate mice. But for the most part, it was not aggressive. It had been brought up to, had been raised to being fed mice and never actually hunted. So basically, it was not aggressive. I mean, the mice that we fed it were frozen. I had them in the freezer. I'd get them out and lay them on top of the unit there to warm them up a little bit so they had a scent to them. Then I'd throw them in there and the snake would just go over and sniff it and swallow it. It's like, yeah. So it never got the idea of had to fight for its food. So was very, very friendly. Never bit anybody. Anybody could pick it up. It was very friendly. Interesting. Now, I did a workshop in Mexico, and in that workshop, I took 27 people uh, down dirt roads in the backcountry of Mexico. And I'm not going to go into the whole long story, but we did this workshop. So um, the man who owned the property wanted to get the Indians that used to live there to come back to the property. And so that was his goal, and that was his request. So I went there to change the dynamics. So change the boundaries, change the rules. The Indians were taken away from there because the United States government wanted that mountain to put towers on during World War II. When the war was over, the towers were useless. Finally, someone made them take the towers down, but the Indians still did not come back. So my request to me was to get the Indians to come back. It was their land. They need to have it back. So, okay, I'll go along with that. So I took these 27 people. We created a circle out there. We did some whatever, played with some phenomena. We did this, we did that. We did all this, whatever we did. We spent the whole day there fooling around with it. We had a little barbecue, and then we all cooked something, and we had a fun time. It was dark. We got there around 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was like dark when we left. So it was really fun. Within 2 weeks, the Indians came. Um, but what was very, very interesting, the next morning, I had created a circle with rocks in a clearing on his property. And I would sit in there and I would sit in a chair in there and do an energy exercise with my energy. And then I'd have everybody in train with me and match. I said, with 27 plus me, 28 of us, we can raise the energy here. But the fact that the Indians were insulted by being taken away from their land, that will start to move that energy out, which is in this hollow, and all of a sudden it'll be a return for them. And so I was just simply reading the different energies I saw in the trees and everything else. It's all just phenomenal stuff. It's like whatever, almost as if you're imagining it all, just as well. And then we changed all that. Then we had left that night. The next morning, when the guy woke up, he had a dog. The dog was not people friendly. So the whole time we were there, it stayed a couple hundred yards away from the property. The next morning, when he came out, all he had there was an outhouse. So he came out to go to the outhouse. Why, he looked over, and his dog was laying in that circle with a wildcat. And the two were laying there resting in that circle that we had used. And this just like shocked him. So I got a message from him saying, I, I've never seen my dog friendly with anything. It's not aggressive. It doesn't attack things. It just barks a lot. Always tells me if somebody's coming, but it never comes into camp if there's anybody here. But I'm shocked to see it laying there with a wildcat. And when I came out of the bathroom, I'm standing there looking at them, and they both wake up and they shake their head and they look at each other and they just wandered away. Like, no big deal. Like I said, 2 weeks later, the Indians showed up and they said, we want to return home, but we don't know how. And so they then did ritual and figured out how to be back to their land. But interesting. That's the nature. I'm just giving you an example in a story about setting up boundaries and how that can be switched for you and how you can change that. Uh, I'd like to be able to tell you it's like 5 steps. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't quite work that way. You have to be able to go inside. You have to be able to recognize that you are the authority. Wow. And then you have to make consideration for everyone else. But you then start to say, here's my boundaries. You can be whoever you are, but here's my boundaries. I don't want to be you, and you don't need to be me. There's our boundaries. And then I can have my authority, and then I can. So it got me well, and it got me through life so far. Yeah, I'm not sure that I want to live forever, but I'm surprised I made it this far because I got a lot of unhealthy history in the background. So thank you very much. It's been a very interesting journey. I will start in October looking at maybe some other tools and techniques and some ideas and kind of go back to some of those themes. But I think I've covered mostly where these ideas came from me. Uh, I I have other ideas. I have one of Ken Wilber's best books, I think, is No Boundaries. Yeah, it's a Buddhist concept, but nonetheless, he's a Buddhist. But his book was really good reference, and it's like I started looking at that and says, yeah, no boundaries is establishing boundaries where you can interact with someone, and then you're within the context of defining you. Then there's an element of respect for someone else who responds to them. So by establishing a boundary, you establish a condition of having no boundaries because you don't have to impose your fear or expectation onto someone else. You don't have to sit behind a screen, for heaven's sakes. It's like, oh my gosh. Um, you start to open up to the world. So maybe I translate that a little differently, but anyway, that's been my 80 years of experience. And most certainly it's like, so I can travel the world. I can get the food that I need to eat. I can have a relationship with people. I can interact. I don't get in trouble. At least if I do get in trouble, I don't get caught. uh, nice having boundaries and having an element of respect and consideration. Okay, enough said. Any questions? Please email chris@wizardscats.com. I'd be glad to answer your questions, may even come up in this format. Um, I, I get people that have consideration and questions, and most of the time, it's people that are already communicating to me, so I just answer them. But when I get 4 or 5 people with the same question, then I like to make a little video because I figure there's an awful lot of you out there that have questions that have not stepped up and decided that yeah, it's time to ask Chris a question. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but two heads are better than one. 3 or 4 are better. If it's a really tough situation, I'll email some really talented people that I work with, and we'll have a group session, and we'll be able to take a look at that and help you out. All right. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful September, and we'll talk to you maybe in October. All right.